In a luxurious mansion, an elderly woman lives surrounded by flowers, silence, and fear. Behind the perfect smiles and gala dinners lies hidden a cruel cycle of abuse and manipulation. What seemed like senility was, in fact, a cry for help muffled by appearances. But a small note left under a coffee cup unleashes the truth, and no one is prepared for what it reveals. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise, this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. In Belgravia, an upscale neighborhood in London, the Sterling family mansion stood out for its imposing presence and meticulously maintained garden. The classical architecture, with Greek columns and wide windows, reflected the status of one of London's most traditional high society families. Mrs. Eleanor, a 76-year-old widow, heiress to a fortune built in the textile industry, used to wake up early to enjoy the sunrise from her bedroom balcony. But on that autumn morning, her trembling hands could barely hold her teacup as she gazed at the garden with distant eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor, are you all right? You look like you haven't slept properly," asked Connie, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over 2 decades. Her worried gaze swept over her employer's drawn face, noticing the deep dark circles under her eyes and a purple mark almost hidden by the sleeve of her silk robe. "Yes, I am, Connie. Just a little tired. I suppose age is catching up with me," Eleanor replied, nervously adjusting her sleeve to cover the bruise. "Don't worry." Connie sighed but didn't press the issue. She knew something was wrong, but she also knew her position was delicate. She had witnessed enough to understand that the reality within those walls was very different from the perfect image the family projected to the world. Downstairs, Bianca Sterling, Mrs. Eleanor's daughter-in-law, organized her day's agenda on her state-of-the-art tablet. At 38, she was the personification of elegance. Perfectly straightened brown hair, impeccable makeup, and designer clothes that highlighted her athletic silhouette. A graduate of the London School of Economics, she had abandoned a promising career in administration to dedicate herself to her family after marrying Robert, Mrs. Eleanor's only son and CEO of Sterling Industries. "Good morning, my dear," Robert said, entering the kitchen and adjusting the tie of his Italian suit. Tall, athletic, and with a smile that charmed everyone in business meetings, he was the image of success. "Are you going to the foundation meeting today?" "Yes, darling. We have the charity event to organize. Afterwards, I'll stop by the spa and be back in time to accompany your mother to the doctor," Bianca replied, standing up to adjust her husband's tie with a calculated smile. "By the way, I'm worried about her. She's been so confused lately. Just yesterday, I found her wandering the corridor disoriented." Robert frowned, concerned. "Do you think we should schedule an appointment with Dr. Paul, the neurologist?" "I've already booked one for next week. You know how much I worry about her health," Bianca replied, her eyes conveying a false sweetness. "It's the least I can do for your mother." Robert smiled, kissing his wife's forehead. "That's why I love you so much. Always taking care of everyone." He checked his wristwatch. "I have to go. Meeting with Chinese investors today. Good luck, my love. You'll be brilliant as always." As soon as the door closed and the sound of the BMW engine faded, Bianca's expression changed completely. The sweet smile gave way to a thin, tense line. Her eyes lost their tender sparkle and assumed a calculating coldness. She walked upstairs with firm steps, knocking hard on Mrs. Eleanor's bedroom door. "It's time to come downstairs." "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm not going to wait all day," she announced in a sharp voice. The elderly woman, who was now struggling to get dressed, flinched at the tone. "I'm almost ready, Bianca. I just need to finish getting dressed." Bianca entered the room uninvited, observing with disdain her mother-in-law trying to button her dress. "Look at this. She can't even dress herself properly anymore. She's becoming a burden to all of us." Mrs. Eleanor lowered her eyes, feeling the weight of the humiliation. "I'm sorry, it's just that my fingers, your memory, your legs." "Always an excuse, isn't it?" Bianca interrupted, approaching menacingly. "Robert works day and night to maintain this standard of living, to give you every comfort. And what does he get in return? A useless mother who only causes trouble." The words hit Mrs. Eleanor like physical blows. Years ago, she would never have allowed herself to be treated this way. As president of Sterling Industries after her husband's passing, she had commanded hundreds of employees with firmness and respect. Now reduced by age and fear, she only absorbed the aggressions in silence. "Breakfast is served downstairs. You have 5 minutes to come down or you won't eat until lunch," Bianca decreed, leaving the room and slamming the door. In the corridor, Bianca almost collided with Connie, who was carrying clean sheets. "Were you spying, Connie?" "No, madam. I just came to change the bedding," the housekeeper replied, avoiding her employer's gaze. "Excellent. Remember your place in this house," Bianca warned, before descending the stairs with elegance, as if the previous scene had never happened. In the kitchen, Connie found George, the middle-aged gardener who had cared for the mansion's gardens for years. "It's getting worse every day, Connie," he commented in a low voice. "Yesterday I saw Mrs. Eleanor crying hidden in the gazebo. When she saw me, she pretended everything was fine, but her wrist was all bruised." "I know," Connie replied, making sure they were alone. "But what can we do? Mr. Robert sees nothing beyond that mask his wife wears when he's around. And if we say anything, we'll lose our jobs instantly. What about Mrs. Eleanor? She was always so strong, even bossy. How does she let this happen?" Connie sighed, putting water onto heat. "A mother's love, George. She doesn't want to disappoint her son. She thinks she'll ruin his happiness if she tells him the truth." Outside the mansion, the chauffeur waited to take Bianca to the Charity Foundation meeting she presided over. Impeccably dressed, she got into the car with a radiant smile, completely different from the woman who had terrorized her mother-in-law minutes earlier. "Good morning, Anthony." "To the foundation headquarters, please," she instructed in a melodious voice. During the drive, Bianca checked notifications on her phone. Among the messages, there was a photo sent by a society magazine. She and Robert at the last charity event, under the headline, "Belgravia's Perfect Couple." She smiled, satisfied. The carefully constructed image worked perfectly. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Mrs. Eleanor finally gathered the strength to descend the stairs, leaning on the handrail with each step. Upon reaching the dining room, she found only Connie, who quickly brought her a cup of coffee and some toast. "You need to eat properly," Connie insisted, noticing how the dress that was once snug now seemed loose on the elderly woman's thin body. "Thank you, Connie," Mrs. Eleanor replied with a faint smile. "You are very kind." "Mrs. Eleanor," the housekeeper began hesitantly, "you know you can count on me, don't you? For anything." For an instant, the elderly woman's eyes shone with a spark of the strong woman she had once been, but soon the sparkle faded, replaced by fear. "I know, dear, but it's all right. I just need to adapt. Age brings changes, and we must accept them." Connie knew it wasn't just the changes of age that haunted Mrs. Eleanor, but she chose not to insist. For now she would observe and wait for the right moment to act. Because one thing she knew for sure, behind the shining facade of that perfect family, a shadow grew larger every day. The following week, the Sterling mansion was impeccably decorated for the monthly dinner that gathered London's leading entrepreneurs. The silverware gleamed under the crystal chandelier, fresh flowers brought vibrant colors to the dining room, and the aroma of gourmet feijoada prepared by the hired chef filled the air. Bianca supervised every detail with eagle eyes, ensuring everything was perfect to impress the guests. "Connie, these glasses are not aligned correctly," she criticized, adjusting the position of the crystals on the table with millimeter precision. "And tell Mrs. Eleanor to wear the blue dress I bought for her. I don't want her showing up in those antiquated clothes today." The housekeeper nodded and went upstairs towards the elderly woman's room. She found Mrs. Eleanor sitting in the armchair near the window, staring fixedly at the garden, as if searching for an escape route. "Mrs. Eleanor?" "Mrs. Bianca asked you to wear the new blue dress," she gently informed. The elderly woman sighed, her tired eyes turning to Connie. "That dress is too low cut for a woman my age, Connie. I prefer to wear my green dress, which is more discreet." "I know, Mrs. Eleanor, but—" Connie hesitated, knowing what would happen if her employer didn't follow her daughter-in-law's orders. "Perhaps it's better to avoid confrontations today." "Confrontations," Mrs. Eleanor repeated with a bitter smile. "Is that what we call it now? When she hid my blood pressure medication last week, because I thought the flower arrangement at the entrance was ugly, was that also a confrontation?" Connie sat on the edge of the bed, making sure no one could hear them. "You need to tell Mr. Robert, Mrs. Eleanor. This cannot continue." "And say what, Connie? That his perfect wife, the woman everyone admires, who organizes charity events, who smiles for the cameras, is a monster when no one is looking." Mrs. Eleanor shook her head. "He would never believe it. And if he did, I would destroy his marriage. I can't do that to my only son." "But Mrs. Eleanor—" "Don't worry about me," the elderly woman interrupted, getting up with some difficulty. "I've lived long enough to endure a little more. Now help me put on this blue dress before she comes to check personally." Downstairs, Robert arrived from the office, finding his wife checking the guest list. "Hi, my love." "All ready for today?" he asked, kissing her affectionately. "Almost. Just a few last-minute details," Bianca replied with her charming smile. "Oh, I remembered to ask the chef to prepare that dessert Senator Maxwell likes so much. We need him on our side for the expansion project for the Northeast, don't we?" Robert hugged his wife by the waist, admiring her shrewdness. "You think of everything, don't you? What would I do without you? You'd probably still be trying to balance spreadsheets and meetings without being able to expand the business," she joked, adjusting his jacket lapel. "Speaking of which, I've booked the neurologist for your mother on Thursday. I'm increasingly concerned about her memory lapses." "What lapses? I haven't noticed anything different." Bianca assumed an expression of studied concern. "Because you're always busy, dear. Just yesterday she put salt in her coffee instead of sugar. And last week, I found her trying to leave the house at 3 in the morning, saying she had an important meeting. I fear it's the beginning of dementia." Robert frowned, genuinely worried. "My God, I had no idea it was so serious." "Thank you for taking care of this, my love. I'll try to be present at the appointment." "You don't have to. I know how busy you are." "I'll take care of everything," Bianca replied, holding her husband's hands. "You worry about business, I worry about family." Perfect match, isn't it? At 7 in the evening, guests began to arrive. Bianca, dazzling in a designer red dress, greeted everyone with smiles and warm hugs. Robert, by her side, was proud to have such a perfect wife, who moved elegantly among London's highest social circles. Mrs. Eleanor, in the blue dress that highlighted the worrying thinness of her body, remained seated in a corner of the room, observing the scene with a forced smile. Periodically, Bianca would approach, touch her shoulder with false affection, and ask loud enough for everyone to hear, "Is everything all right, Mrs. Eleanor? Would you like me to ask Connie to bring your medication?" "I'm fine, dear," the elderly woman replied automatically. Like a rehearsed script, Dr. Amanda Perry, a renowned neurologist and longtime family friend of the Sterlings, approached Mrs. Eleanor during the cocktail reception. "Long time no see, Eleanor. How are you?" she asked sincerely. "Oh, Amanda. So good to see you," the elderly woman replied with a genuine smile, the first of the evening. "I'm getting by, you know how it is. Age doesn't forgive." The doctor looked carefully at her friend, noticing details that her clinical eye didn't miss: the hunched posture, the frightened look, the trembling hands that didn't seem to be merely a consequence of age. "I heard you're consulting Paul Miller. Excellent professional. But if you need a second opinion, I'm available." Before Mrs. Eleanor could reply, Bianca materialized beside them with 2 glasses of champagne. "Dr. Perry, what a pleasure to have you here," she exclaimed, handing a glass to the doctor. "Mrs. Eleanor really needs good doctors now. I've noticed so many worrying signs." "Really?" Amanda questioned, her eyes alternating between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. "Oh, yes. Confusion, disorientation, even some episodes of aggressiveness. Isn't that right, Mrs. Eleanor?" Bianca placed her hand on her mother-in-law's shoulder, squeezing slightly, in a gesture that to others seemed affectionate, but which Mrs. Eleanor felt as a warning. I've been a little confused sometimes," the elderly woman murmured, lowering her eyes. Amanda frowned but had no chance to deepen the conversation as Robert announced that dinner would be served. Bianca guided Mrs. Eleanor to her place at the table, whispering in her ear as she helped her sit down, "Behave yourself, or your arthritis medication might disappear for an entire month." During dinner, Bianca shone as a hostess, telling funny stories, discussing politics and art, charming everyone with her intelligence and charm. Occasionally, she cast worried glances at her mother-in-law, commenting in a low voice to closer guests, "Poor dear, she's getting more fragile every day. We do our best, but age is relentless." After dessert, Mrs. Eleanor excused herself, citing tiredness. Robert stood up to help her, but Bianca intervened. "Let me take her, darling. Continue your conversation with the senator about the project." On the stairs, away from the guests' eyes, Bianca squeezed Mrs. Eleanor's arm hard. "You almost ruined everything talking to Amanda. What were you thinking? She's been my friend for decades, Bianca. We were just catching up," the elderly woman defended herself. "Friend? Don't make me laugh. You don't have friends, Mrs. Eleanor. You just have a son who keeps you out of obligation and a daughter-in-law who pretends to care about you in front of others. Understand?" Silent tears streamed down the wrinkled face, but Mrs. Eleanor didn't reply. Upon reaching the room, Bianca practically pushed her inside. "Tomorrow we'll discuss your disobedience. Now I need to go back to the guests who truly matter." Alone in the room, Mrs. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. From a nightstand drawer, she took out a small battery-powered radio, an old gift from Robert. It was her only comfort, her connection to the outside world. She tuned into a classical music station, and with the volume low so no one would hear, let Chopin's notes transport her far from that place that should have been her home, but had become a gilded cage. The next morning, when Mrs. Eleanor came down for breakfast, she found Bianca rummaging through her drawers. "What are you looking for?" she asked, feeling a tightening in her chest. Bianca turned, holding the small radio. I was bothered by the noise last night. Please, Bianca, it's my only—" "Your only what? Hobby? Pleasure?" Bianca laughed, putting the device in her purse. "Old people like you don't need pleasures, Mrs. Eleanor. You just need to exist in silence without bothering anyone. In fact, I think I'll stop by Dr. Paul's office today to talk about these hallucination episodes of yours." "What hallucination?" "I didn't." "Oh, no? And that absurd story you tried to tell Dr. Perry yesterday? About me hiding your medication? About me mistreating you?" Bianca approached, her eyes cold as ice. "Who would believe you against me, Mrs. Eleanor?" The confused elderly lady against the devoted daughter-in-law who abandoned her career to take care of the family. Think carefully before trying something like that again. At breakfast, Robert commented on the success of the dinner, completely oblivious to the tension between his wife and mother. "Everyone praised the organization, my love. Senator Maxwell practically guaranteed support for the project. How wonderful, darling. All the work was worth it then," Bianca smiled, pouring a cup of coffee for her husband. "And you, mother? Did you enjoy yourself yesterday?" Robert asked, finally noticing his mother's dejected expression. Before Mrs. Eleanor could reply, Bianca intervened. "Oh, Robert, your mother was so confused yesterday. Imagine she tried to tell me that Amanda wasn't a doctor, but a government spy." Bianca laughed as if telling an amusing anecdote. "Dr. Paul said we should note down these episodes to assess the progression of her condition." Robert looked worriedly at his mother. "Is that true, mother?" Mrs. Eleanor looked at her son, then at her daughter-in-law, and finally lowered her eyes to her untouched plate. "I think I got a little confused. See? I'm really worried," Bianca continued, touching her husband's hand with apparent distress. "Perhaps we should consider a full-time companion." "No," Mrs. Eleanor exclaimed with sudden energy. "I don't need a stranger watching me. I have Connie. Connie has other duties in the house, mother. She can't keep an eye on you all the time." "Robert, please go," the elderly woman pleaded. The businessman sighed, torn between genuine concern and the discomfort of the situation. "Let's wait for the neurologist's appointment, all right? Then we'll decide what's best to do." Bianca nodded magnanimously. "Of course, darling. Always what's best for your mother." After Robert left for work, Connie found Mrs. Eleanor in the garden, sitting alone on the bench under the cherry tree. "Are you all right?" she asked, sitting beside her employer. "She took my radio, Connie," Mrs. Eleanor murmured, her hands twisting in her lap. "It was the only thing that brought me some comfort." The housekeeper sighed, looking around to make sure they were alone. "Mrs. Eleanor, this cannot continue. You need to tell Mr. Robert the truth." "And how do I prove it?" "She's too clever. She does everything when no one is looking. She has an answer for everything. And now she's convincing my son that I'm going crazy." A single tear rolled down the elderly woman's face. "Perhaps I am." "You are not crazy," Connie stated firmly, holding Mrs. Eleanor's hands in hers. "And you are not alone. I see what's happening, George sees it, and we will find a way to make Mr. Robert see it too." "How?" "I don't know yet. But I promise we'll think of something. At that moment, Bianca's voice sounded from the balcony. "Connie, I need you up here now." The housekeeper squeezed Mrs. Eleanor's hand one last time before standing up. "Have faith, Mrs. Eleanor. The truth always finds a way." As she watched Connie walk away, Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to remember what her life was like before, when she commanded meetings, made important decisions, was respected. Now a prisoner in her own home, she wondered if she would ever taste freedom again. The week passed slowly for Mrs. Eleanor. Without her radio, the days seemed even emptier and the nights endless. On Thursday, as planned, Bianca took her to the appointment with the neurologist, Dr. Paul Miller. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor." The doctor, a middle-aged man with a kind expression, greeted her. "How have you been feeling?" Before she could answer, Bianca intervened. "Doctor, we are very worried. She has been having increasingly frequent episodes of confusion and erratic behavior." Dr. Miller observed the dynamic between the two women, noting how Mrs. Eleanor seemed to shrink in her daughter-in-law's presence. "I would like to hear from the patient herself, if you don't mind, Mrs. Sterling." "Of course, Doctor," Bianca replied with a forced smile. "I just wanted to provide context." The doctor turned back to the elderly woman. "So, Mrs. Eleanor, have you noticed any difficulty with memory, confusion, disorientation?" The elderly woman hesitated, her eyes briefly meeting her daughter-in-law's, before lowering her gaze to her trembling hands in her lap. Sometimes I feel a little confused, yes." "What kind of confusion?" Another furtive glance at Bianca, who was watching her intently. I forget where I put things. Sometimes I don't really know what time it is." "See, Doctor?" Bianca interrupted again. "And there are also episodes of aggressiveness and paranoia. Last week she woke up screaming in the middle of the night, saying someone was trying to hurt her." Dr. Miller frowned, making notes. "Interesting. Mrs. Eleanor, do you remember this episode, Mrs.?" Eleanor opened her mouth to speak, but Bianca was quicker. "She probably doesn't remember, Doctor. That's precisely the problem." "Mrs. Sterling," the doctor said firmly, "I appreciate your concern, but I need to hear directly from the patient. If you could give us a few minutes alone." "Alone, but Doctor, she might get confused, give wrong information. It's standard procedure, Mrs. Sterling. Please." Reluctantly, Bianca stood up. "I'll be right outside if you need me, Doctor." Before leaving, she cast a meaningful glance at her mother-in-law, a clear warning. When they were alone, the neurologist pulled his chair closer. "Now, Mrs. Eleanor, can you tell me how you have truly been feeling?" The elderly woman remained silent for a few moments, weighing her options. She desperately wanted to tell the truth, but fear paralyzed her. "Doctor, she began, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. "It's all right. Take your time," the doctor encouraged. "What we discuss here is confidential." "I'm afraid," she finally confessed in a whisper. "Not so much of forgetting things, but of—" A sound at the door interrupted the confession. It was Bianca, who opened the door with an artificial smile. "Sorry, I forgot my purse." She picked up her purse and left again, but Mrs. Eleanor's moment of courage had passed. The doctor sighed, noticing the change. He continued with the clinical examination, asking questions about orientation, memory, and reasoning. To his surprise, Mrs. Eleanor answered everything correctly, demonstrating a much more lucid mind than her daughter-in-law's complaints suggested. "Well, Mrs. Eleanor, from what I see, you are cognitively very well for someone your age. I will order some tests to rule out other possibilities, but I see no worrying signs of dementia or other neurological disorder." When Bianca returned, to hear the diagnosis, she could barely disguise her disappointment. "But doctor, what about the episodes I mentioned? The confusions, the disorientation? They can be caused by various factors: stress, poor sleep quality, even side effects of medications. We will investigate all of that," the doctor replied, handing her the test requisition. "For now, I recommend only that Mrs. Eleanor maintains a calm routine with enjoyable and stimulating activities." On the way back home, the silence inside the car was oppressive. Bianca drove with her lips pursed in a thin line of discontent. Finally, as they stopped at a traffic light, she turned to her mother-in-law. "What did you tell him when you were alone?" Nothing beyond what he asked me about my memory, Mrs. Eleanor replied, staring straight ahead. Are you sure? Because he didn't seem very convinced of your confusion. Bianca made air quotes with her fingers, her tone laden with sarcasm. You know what happens to old people who lie, Mrs. Eleanor. They end up alone in low-quality nursing homes, forgotten by everyone. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the weight of fear on her shoulders. Meanwhile, at the Sterling mansion, Connie was tidying Mrs. Eleanor's room when she found, hidden between the pages of an old book, a diary. Curiosity made her open it, and with a heavy heart, she read some recent pages. May 10th. Today, Bianca. Hid my blood pressure medication because I opposed the idea of selling the country estate in the Cotswolds. When I asked her to return them, she laughed and said I was too old to worry about my health. May 15th. Robert doesn't notice anything. To him, Bianca is the perfect wife. Today she accidentally spilled hot tea on my lap during breakfast. Then she feigned concern when Robert appeared, saying I had trembled and dropped the cup. May 22nd. I can't sleep properly anymore. I'm afraid she'll come into my room at night. Yesterday she asked Robert to remove the lock from my door, claiming, concern for my safety, in case I fall and need help. Tears streamed down Connie's face as she read. Those words confirmed all her suspicions. With trembling hands, she put the diary back exactly where she had found it and went downstairs, determined. In the kitchen, she found George drinking coffee. We need to do something, George. This cannot continue. The gardener nodded gravely. I've thought a lot about it. Mr. Robert needs to know the truth, but how to prove it? Mrs. Sterling is too clever. She never leaves evidence. I just found Mrs. Eleanor's diary. It's all there, recorded. And you think he'll believe a diary? Mrs. Sterling will say they are the delusions of a confused old woman, George argued. Connie bit her lip, thoughtful. You're right. We need something more concrete, something he can't deny. Suddenly her eyes lit up. I have an idea. That night, during dinner, Robert commented on his mother's doctor's appointment. So how was it with Dr. Paul? What did he say? Bianca took a sip of wine before answering, carefully choosing her words. Well, he ordered several tests. He said she's fine for her age, but you know how these doctors are, always cautious with their diagnoses. But do you really think she has memory problems? Robert insisted, observing his mother, who was eating in silence across the table. Darling, you saw the episodes yourself. Just yesterday she insisted I had hidden her radio, when in fact the device was broken and I sent it for repair. Bianca affectionately touched her husband's hand. I know it's hard to accept, but we have to prepare for the possibility of her needing more intensive care. Mrs. Eleanor looked up from her plate, a flash of indignation crossing her tired face. My radio wasn't broken, Bianca. See? Bianca sighed dramatically. It's this kind of confusion I'm talking about, Robert. I explained to her 3 times that the radio had speaker problems and that I sent it for repair. Robert looked from his mother to his wife, unsure what to think. When will the repair be finished, my love? In a week, they said, but I've already ordered a new one, more modern and with better sound. Mrs. Eleanor lowered her eyes again, defeated. There was no point in arguing. Her word, a supposedly confused old woman's, against that of the perfect daughter-in-law. Who would believe her? After dinner, while Robert worked in his office and Bianca took a bath, Connie discreetly slipped into Mrs. Eleanor's room. Mrs. Eleanor, I need to talk to you, she whispered, closing the door. I found your diary today. Panic crossed the elderly woman's face. You read it? Yes. And now I'm sure of what was happening. We need to do something. There's nothing to do, Connie. Bianca has Robert wrapped around her finger. He'll never believe me. Perhaps he will if he sees it with his own eyes, the housekeeper suggested, lowering her voice even further. I have a plan, but I need your help. Mrs. Eleanor listened intently as Connie explained her idea. It was risky, but perhaps it was her only chance. Are you sure about this, Connie? If Bianca finds out, you could lose your job. Some risks are worth it, Mrs. Eleanor. You took care of my daughter when she got sick, and I didn't have money for the treatment. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Tears shone in the elderly woman's eyes. "Thank you, Connie, but I'm afraid not for me, but for you. Don't worry about me. We just need to wait for the right moment." The next morning, Connie asked George to accompany her to the bakery, making it clear it was an important matter. Away from the mansion, she revealed her plan. "I'm going to leave an anonymous note for Mr. Robert, something that plants doubt in his mind, that makes him pay more attention." "But Connie, what if Mrs. Sterling intercepts the note?" "That's why I need your help. I'll put the note under his coffee cup, but I need you to distract Mrs. Sterling for a few minutes tomorrow morning." George scratched his head, thoughtful. "I can say there's a problem with the rose bushes she cherishes so much. That should keep her busy for a while." "Perfect." Back at the mansion, Connie carefully wrote the note in disguised handwriting. "If something ever happens, look at your mother's arms." She folded the small piece of paper and put it in her apron pocket, waiting for the right moment. That night, as had become habitual, Bianca entered Mrs. Eleanor's room for what she called a nightly check. In reality, another opportunity to torment her. "Tomorrow important guests are coming for lunch," she announced, rummaging through her mother-in-law's closet. "I don't want you to wear that horrible beige dress you like so much. I've set aside something more appropriate." "Can I at least choose my own clothes?" Mrs. Eleanor asked, tired of being treated like a doll. Bianca turned, a cruel smile on her lips. "Of course not. You lost that right when you decided to become old and useless, living in my house, eating the food my husband pays for." "This house is mine, Bianca. I built it with my husband. I managed the family business for years after he passed." Her daughter-in-law's smile transformed into an expression of contained fury. In 3 quick steps, she was beside her mother-in-law, grabbing her arm tightly. "Listen carefully, old woman. This house, the business, all of it now belongs to my husband. You are just a burden we carry out of obligation. So I suggest you stay quiet and grateful for the roof you still have over your head." Her fingers squeezed Mrs. Eleanor's arm so hard it would leave marks. The elderly woman groaned in pain but did not scream. She knew no one would come to her rescue. Bianca finally released her, smoothing her own dress as if she had touched something dirty. "Good night, Mrs. Eleanor. I hope you have disturbing dreams." Alone again, Mrs. Eleanor cried silently, massaging her sore arm, unaware that soon those marks would be the evidence that would change everything. The next morning dawned with a fine drizzle falling over London, enveloping the Sterling mansion in a melancholic mist. Connie woke earlier than usual, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. Today would be the day she put her plan into action. In the kitchen, she prepared breakfast with extra care. For Robert, his traditional strong coffee with a slice of wholemeal bread and scrambled eggs. For Bianca, green detox juice and yogurt with granola. For Mrs. Eleanor, chamomile tea and toast with apricot jam. While arranging Robert's tray, she discreetly slid the small note under his coffee cup. George arrived promptly at 7:30, exchanging a meaningful glance with Connie. The plan was underway. Robert was the first to come down, checking emails on his phone. "Good morning, Connie. Where are the ladies? Mrs. Sterling is still getting ready, and Mrs. Eleanor hasn't come down," the housekeeper replied, serving coffee. "Do you have an early meeting today?"
"Actually, no."
"I thought I'd work from home this morning." Robert frowned, surprised by his own decision. "I've been so absent that I barely see my mother. Maybe it's good to spend some time with her today." Connie felt cautious relief. It was better than she expected. Robert would be home to see what happened. Bianca came down minutes later, impeccable in a grey tailored suit. "Good morning, my love. Are you leaving already?" "I decided to stay home this morning," Robert replied, kissing her lightly. "It's been a while since I spent quality time with you all." Bianca hesitated for an instant, a flash of unease crossing her face before she smiled. "What a great idea, darling. But don't forget we have that lunch with the Maxwells today. Of course, I'll be ready in time." As he lifted his cup, Robert noticed the piece of paper. Intrigued, he discreetly unfolded it under the table, reading the words that made his blood run cold. "If something ever happens, look at your mother's arms." He looked around, trying to identify who could have left the note. But Connie had already left the dining room, and Bianca was checking messages on her phone. He put the paper in his pocket, a feeling of discomfort settling in his stomach. At that moment, George knocked on the front door, being answered by Bianca. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm sorry to bother you so early, but there's a serious problem with the imported rose bushes at the entrance. I think it's some kind of pest, and as you always say that no one touches them without your authorization. My God, today of all days with guests coming." Bianca sighed, irritated. "I'll take a look. Robert, I'll be back in a few minutes." As soon as Bianca left with George, Connie reappeared. "Mr. Robert, Mrs. Eleanor is asking for help to come down. She said the stairs are slippery with this rain." Robert nodded, climbing the steps towards his mother's room. He found her sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her nightgown. "Mother, Connie said you asked for help to come down?" Mrs. Eleanor seemed confused. "I didn't ask for anything, son." Robert frowned, finding the situation strange. His eyes then scanned his mother's fragile figure, noticing how she seemed to have shrunk in recent months. His gaze stopped at her arms exposed by the short sleeve of her nightgown. Purple and yellowish marks contrasted with her pale skin. Bruises in different stages of healing, some recent, others already fading. "Mother, what is this on your arm?" He approached, gently touching the marks. Mrs. Eleanor instinctively pulled her sleeve, trying to cover the evidence. "Nothing, son. I just bumped into the corner of the nightstand." "On both arms. And these here look old." The mysterious note now made sense. Robert sat beside his mother, holding her hands in his. "Mother, please, tell me the truth. Who did this to you?" Mrs. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Years of fear and silence weighed on her chest, but something in her son's worried expression gave her courage. "Robert, Before she could continue, Bianca's voice sounded from the door. "What's going on here?" The tone was sweet, but her eyes shot daggers in Mrs. Eleanor's direction. Robert stood up, still holding his mother's hand. "Bianca, do you know anything about these injuries on my mother's arms?" Bianca's expression quickly transformed into concern. "Oh, heavens, she fell in the bathroom yesterday. I didn't tell you so as not to worry you, but that's why I insisted so much on the idea of a companion." "Fell," Robert repeated, his gaze alternating between his wife and mother. "Some of these bruises look weeks old." "Darling," Bianca approached, touching her husband's arm with false tenderness. "Your mother has been getting injured frequently. It's part of the process. You know, age, balance not being the same anymore. Dr. Paul even commented on it, about how elderly people with dementia tend to have more accidents." "I don't have dementia," Mrs. Eleanor protested, her voice surprisingly firm. "Dr. Paul didn't say that." Bianca cast an icy glance at her mother-in-law before turning her attention back to Robert. "See, she doesn't even remember her own appointment." A heavy silence settled in the room. Robert looked at the note in his hand, then at his mother's arms, and finally at his wife's tense face. "Let's go downstairs, Mother. Connie prepared a special breakfast, and I think we all need to talk." As he helped Mrs. Eleanor get dressed, Robert noticed how his mother flinched at the slightest touch, as if she was always expecting pain. The seed of doubt was planted, and now it was beginning to germinate. In the dining room, Connie served coffee while observing the tense family dynamic. Bianca kept talking, filling every silence with stories about her mother-in-law's confusions, about how difficult it was to care for someone elderly, about the sacrifices she made daily. "In fact, Robert, I was thinking," she continued, pouring herself more green juice, "perhaps we should consider that clinic in the Lake District for your mother. Fresh mountain air, specialized medical team." "You want to send my mother to a clinic?" Robert interrupted, his tone clearly suspicious. "Not send, darling. Offer the best possible care," Bianca corrected with a rehearsed smile. "Think about it. She would have 24-hour attention, activities suitable for her age. And she would be far from home. Far from me. It would be for her own good, Robert. You yourself said you barely see her because of work. There she would have constant companionship." While the couple argued, Bianca's phone rang. She looked at the screen and frowned. "I need to answer. It's from the foundation." "Excuse me." As soon as Bianca left, Robert turned to his mother. "Now, Mother, please, tell me the truth. What is happening in this house?" Mrs. Eleanor looked at Connie, who nodded discreetly, encouraging her. The elderly woman took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Robert, Bianca is not who you think she is. When you're not here, she mistreats me, hides my medication, insults me, threatens me. These bruises, She hurts me, son. Robert paled. Why did you never tell me anything? I tried at first, but you were so in love, so sure you had found the perfect woman, and she always denied everything. Said I was confused, making things up. Over time, you started to believe her. Tears streamed freely down her wrinkled face. I was afraid of losing you, son. Of ruining your happiness. Mrs. Eleanor is telling the truth, Mr. Robert, Connie intervened, no longer able to contain herself. I see what happens when you leave. Mrs. Sterling is cruel. Robert ran his hands through his hair, stunned. Why didn't anyone tell me before? We tried in many ways, but Mrs. Sterling is very clever. She never leaves evidence, always has an explanation for everything. Connie hesitated before continuing. The note, I left it. I couldn't bear to see Mrs. Eleanor suffering in silence anymore. At that instant, Bianca returned. Seeing their serious expressions, she stopped at the door, her false smile faltering. Did something happen? Robert slowly stood up. I think we need to talk, Bianca. In private. Of course. Darling, she replied, casting a furious glance at Connie and Mrs. Eleanor before following her husband to the office. As soon as the door closed, Bianca assumed a defensive posture. What is it? Why the long face? My mother just told me some quite disturbing things about how you treat her when I'm absent. And you believed it? Bianca laughed, incredulity in her voice. Robert, your mother is confused, you know that. She's making up stories in her head. It wasn't just her. Connie confirmed everything. Connie? Bianca's tone became disdainful. That ignorant housekeeper? She's probably making up stories to please your mother. You know how those people are, they'll do anything to keep their job. Those people? Connie has worked for our family for over 20 years, Bianca. She helped raise me. That doesn't mean she's trustworthy. Bianca changed tactics, approaching her husband with teary eyes. Robert, I'm hurt by you. How can you doubt me, your wife, the woman who gave up her career to take care of your family, who dedicates every minute of the day to ensure your mother has the best of everything? All this because of stories from a confused old woman and a resentful employee. Robert hesitated, doubt visible on his face. The bruises, Bianca. How do you explain the bruises? I already told you. She falls, bumps into furniture. It's natural at her age, and her radio. She said you took her radio. Bianca rolled her eyes. The radio broke, I sent it for repair. I already explained that. Robert stared at his wife for a long moment. Perhaps he was being unfair, hasty. Perhaps his mother really was confused, mixing reality with imagination. I'm sorry, Bianca. Maybe I exaggerated. It's just that... Seeing my mother like that, so fragile. Bianca smiled, victorious, and hugged her husband. I understand, darling. It's hard to accept that she's getting old. But I'm here to help both of you get through this. Robert nodded, but a small part of him still doubted. I'll work from home for a bit, as I planned. Do you mind postponing lunch with the Maxwells? I'm not in the mood for socializing today. Of course not, my love. I'll call to reschedule. Do you want me to bring you some fresh coffee? Thirsty croissants first. No, thank you. I'll go upstairs to see how my mother is. In Mrs. Eleanor's room, Robert found his mother sitting in the armchair by the window, looking at the garden with a distant expression. Mother, I talked to Bianca, and she denied everything, the elderly woman completed without averting her gaze from the window. Mother, understand, it's a very serious accusation. I need to be sure before you believe your own mother. Mrs. Eleanor finally turned to face him, decades of pain reflected in her tired eyes. It's all right, son. I understand. She's your wife, after all. Robert sat on the edge of the bed, confusion etched on his face. I'll stay home today. Observe, pay attention. If something is truly happening, I will find out. Mrs. Eleanor smiled sadly. She won't do anything while you're around, Robert. She never does. Even so, I'll be vigilant. The rest of the morning passed in a false normalcy. Bianca presented herself as the perfect daughter-in-law. Attentive, patient, always asking if Mrs. Eleanor needed anything, if she was comfortable. But Robert did not fail to notice the cold glint in his wife's eyes when she thought no one was looking, or how his mother flinched almost imperceptibly whenever Bianca approached. At 3 p.m, Robert received an urgent call from the office, a problem with an important client that required his immediate presence. I have to go, Mother, but I'll be back as soon as possible, he promised, kissing the elderly woman's forehead. Don't worry, Robert. We'll be fine here, won't we, Mrs. Eleanor? Bianca smiled, her tone too sweet to be genuine. However, something in his mother's terrified expression made Robert make a decision. You know what? I'll call Mark to handle this. I promised to stay home today, and that's what I'm going to do. The slight contraction in Bianca's smile did not go unnoticed. Are you sure, darling? I know how important that client is. I am. Family first. Isn't that what you always say? A palpable tension settled between the three. Bianca, visibly displeased, muttered something about checking the dinner menu and hurried out. Robert approached his mother, his determination renewed. I will find out the truth, Mother. I promise. What he didn't know was that the truth wouldn't take long to reveal itself, in a much more brutal way than he expected. The day progressed with a palpable tension in the Sterling mansion. Robert remained alert, observing every interaction between his wife and mother with new eyes. The doubts that Connie's note had planted grew with each furtive glance, each forced smile, each silence that lasted too long. Bianca seemed increasingly restless with her husband's constant presence. Several times, she tried to convince him to leave, claiming forgotten appointments or inventing office emergencies, but Robert remained firm in his decision to stay home. Darling, you really don't need to cancel all your commitments because of this misunderstanding, Bianca insisted during afternoon tea, her melodious voice unable to completely mask her irritation. Your mother is fine, I am fine, everything is fine. It's not a misunderstanding, Bianca. It's a serious accusation, and I want to understand what's happening in my own home. Robert kept his tone calm but resolute. By the way, I remembered something. You said you sent my mother's radio for repair. Where is it? The question caught Bianca by surprise. For an instant her smile wavered, but she quickly recomposed herself. At the repair shop, of course. As I said yesterday. Which repair shop? The one at Westfield, London. Why, I want to go pick it up. My mother misses it. Bianca shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. Darling, it's not ready yet. They said it would take a week, remember? Then you don't mind if I call to check the repair status, do you? There must be a receipt, a service order. The silence that followed was revealing. Bianca opened her mouth and closed it again, like a fish out of water. I think I threw away the receipt. You know how disorganized I am with these things. She tried to laugh, but the sound was forced. Robert nodded slowly, assimilating the lie. Of course, no problem. I'll go there anyway. Maybe they can locate it by your name. Robert, this is ridiculous. Are you doubting me because of an old radio? It's not just the radio, Bianca, and you know it. The tension between the two was interrupted by the sound of the intercom. Connie answered and returned, announcing, Mr. Robert, it's Dr. Amanda Perry. She says she came to visit Mrs. Eleanor. Bianca's face visibly paled. Amanda, she didn't say she was coming. Friends don't need a formal invitation, Robert replied, standing up. Ask her to come in, Connie. Amanda Perry entered the room minutes later, elegant in her beige linen suit, carrying a small fruit basket. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, Dr. Perry, Robert replied, greeting her warmly. My mother will be happy to see you. Amanda, what a surprise, Bianca forced a smile, the tension evident in her voice. Unfortunately, Mrs. Eleanor is resting now. Perhaps you could come back another day. She's not resting, Connie corrected, entering the room. I just helped her get dressed. She's on the back balcony listening to the birds. The furious look Bianca shot the housekeeper did not go unnoticed by Robert. Great, I'll call her, he decided. Actually, Amanda intervened, if you don't mind, I'd like to go to her. I have some news about an experimental arthritis treatment that might interest her. I'll accompany you, Robert offered quickly before Bianca could protest. On the back balcony, Mrs. Eleanor sat in a wicker chair, watching the hummingbirds that visited the garden. Upon seeing Amanda, her face lit up with a genuine smile. Amanda! What a wonderful surprise. I brought your favorite mangoes, the doctor smiled, placing the basket beside her friend. How are you, Eleanor? Better now that I see you, the elderly woman replied, squeezing her friend's hand. Robert, dear, could you ask Connie to bring us some coffee? Robert understood the request for what it truly was, an opportunity for the two to talk alone, and discreetly withdrew. Eleanor, I'm worried about you, Amanda began as soon as they were alone. Since that dinner, I haven't been able to stop thinking about how you seemed frightened. And your daughter-in-law. The things she said about you, they didn't match the woman I've known for 4 decades. Mrs. Eleanor looked around, making sure they were truly alone, before rolling up her cardigan sleeves. Revealing the bruises, Amanda's eyes widened in shock. My God, Eleanor, who did this to you? Bianca, the elderly woman replied, her voice a trembling whisper. For months. Robert never noticed, or perhaps didn't want to notice, until today, or what changed. Connie, my housekeeper. She left a note for Robert, asking him to look at my arms. It was the first time he really saw... Tears shone in her tired eyes, but I still don't know if he believes it. Bianca is so convincing, so perfect in his eyes. Amanda held her friend's hands in hers. I will help you, Eleanor. I am a doctor. I can document these injuries, write a report. And say what? That the perfect daughter-in-law, president of the Children of Tomorrow Foundation, exemplary wife, is actually a monster who tortures an elderly woman? Who will believe it? Robert will. He just needs evidence he can't ignore. Amanda hesitated before continuing. Eleanor, do you trust me? The things. Elderly woman nodded without hesitation. With my life, then let me help. I will schedule an emergency appointment at the hospital. Do tests, document everything officially. She won't be able to deny medical evidence. Inside the house, Bianca paced back and forth in the living room, visibly agitated. What are they talking about so much? Why did Amanda come without warning? They are old friends, Bianca. It's natural they want to talk privately, Robert replied, carefully observing his wife's reactions. But your mother isn't well. She's confused. She might say anything. Like what, for example? Bianca stopped, realizing the trap in the question. I don't know. Things she imagines, distortions of reality. Dr. Paul explained that this is common in elderly people. Did Dr. Paul say my mother has dementia? Not in those words, but then in what words exactly? Robert's voice was calm but incisive. Before Bianca could elaborate another lie, Connie entered the room. Mr. Robert, Dr. Perry is asking to take Mrs. Eleanor to the hospital for some routine tests. Hospital? What tests? Bianca almost shouted, momentarily losing her composure. Routine for patients with rheumatoid arthritis, Connie explained, avoiding looking directly at Bianca. Dr. Perry said there's a new medication that might help Mrs. Eleanor with her pain. I don't think it's necessary. Bianca regained some control, her tone returning to sweet, yet firm. Mrs. Eleanor already has follow-up with Dr. Paul. We don't need to confuse her with multiple doctors and treatments. Amanda is a neurologist like Paul, and besides, she's my mother's childhood friend, Robert countered. I see no problem with her offering a second opinion. Bianca opened her mouth to protest, but noticed her husband's determined look. Changing tactics, she smiled with false resignation. Of course, if you think it's better. I just worry it might be too much for her. So many doctors, so many tests. I'll accompany them, Robert decided. That way I can talk directly with Amanda about my mother's condition. Panic briefly crossed Bianca's face. Darling, it's not necessary. You have that video conference with the Chinese investors, remember? I can take your mother. The conference can wait. This is more important. Robert's determination made it clear he would not accept arguments. Bianca, cornered, tried one last card. In that case, I'll go with you. After all, I'm the one who takes care of her daily. I know all the details of her medical routine. Robert nodded, watching his wife intently. Great. Connie, please prepare a change of clothes for my mother, in case we need to stay at the hospital longer than planned. While Connie went upstairs, Amanda and Mrs. Eleanor entered the room. Bianca immediately assumed her dedicated daughter-in-law persona, approaching her mother-in-law with false concern. Dear mother-in-law, I heard you're going to the hospital for tests. Are you feeling anything? Just the usual aches, Bianca. Mrs. Eleanor's tone was neutral, but her eyes avoided her daughter-in-law's. Mrs. Eleanor has agreed to participate in a study we are conducting on new approaches to arthritis in elderly patients, Amanda explained, her professional tone revealing nothing about the true nature of the hospital visit. I need to do some initial tests today. I understand. Well, we're all ready to accompany her, aren't we, darling? Bianca smiled at her husband, linking his arm as if nothing was wrong. The drive to St. Thomas's Hospital was silent and tense. In the back seat of the car, Bianca sat between Mrs. Eleanor and Amanda, like a physical barrier preventing any communication between the two. Her fingers drummed nervously on her Italian leather purse, while her gaze alternated between her husband, concentrated on driving, and her mother-in-law staring fixedly out the window. At the hospital, Amanda led the group directly to her wing, avoiding the main reception. "We'll use my private consulting room for the initial exams," she explained, guiding them down a side corridor. Once in the consulting room, the doctor adopted a more formal posture. "Robert, Bianca, could you please wait in the waiting room while I do the initial examination of Mrs. Eleanor? It's standard procedure, so the patient feels comfortable discussing private symptoms." "Of course. Dr. Perry," Robert readily agreed. "Actually," Bianca intervened, her voice tense despite the smile, "as Mrs. Eleanor's primary caregiver, I believe I should be present. She sometimes gets confused when reporting symptoms, and I can help with accurate information. I appreciate your dedication, Bianca, but as a doctor, I need to hear directly from the patient," Amanda replied with professional firmness. "I promise to call you if I need additional information." Without options, Bianca allowed Robert to lead her out of the consulting room. In the corridor, he noticed how his wife's hands trembled slightly. "Are you all right, Bianca? You seem nervous." "I'm just worried about your mother," she replied quickly. "This whole process can be very stressful for someone her age." Inside the consulting room, Amanda locked the door and immediately began documenting Mrs. Eleanor's injuries, photographing the bruises and making detailed notes in her medical record. "When did it start, Eleanor? And please don't omit anything. Soon after the wedding 5 years ago. At first it was just words, insults, humiliations when Robert wasn't around. Then she started hiding my medication, controlling what I ate when I slept. The bruises. They started about 2 years ago, when I questioned a suspicious bank transfer she made from her joint account with Robert." Amanda continued to meticulously document everything, while requesting blood tests and an X-ray to check for possible old fractures that might have gone unnoticed. "I'll ask a social worker specializing in elder abuse cases to come and talk to you too, Eleanor. This will add more weight to your account." In the waiting room, Robert tried to process everything he had discovered in the last few hours. The pieces were starting to fit together. His mother's gradual isolation, the episodes of confusion that only Bianca witnessed, the medication that mysteriously ran out before time, the constant fear in the elderly woman's eyes. "Robert," Bianca's voice interrupted his thoughts, "I think we should seek a second medical opinion before subjecting your mother to all this. Dr. Paul Miller hasn't been my mother's friend for 4 decades, Bianca. Amanda has. Exactly why she might not be objective. Friendship can compromise her medical judgment." Robert looked directly into his wife's eyes. "What are you so afraid Amanda will discover, Bianca?" The direct question caught Bianca off guard. For an instant, the mask fell, revealing a flash of fury and fear in her eyes. But she quickly regained her composure. "What nonsense, Robert. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just concerned about your mother's well-being, as I always have been." Before Robert could reply, the consulting room door opened and Amanda came out, her expression grave. "Robert, could you come here for a moment?" "Alone," she added, when Bianca made a move to stand up too. Inside the consulting room, Amanda showed Robert the photographs and the detailed medical record she had prepared. "Your mother is a victim of abuse, Robert. These bruises are not from accidental falls. Note the finger pressure patterns here and here. She is also malnourished and shows signs of post-traumatic stress." Robert felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. It was one thing to suspect, another to confront concrete evidence. My God, how did I not notice before? How could I have been so blind? "Abusers are masters of manipulation, Robert. And your wife is particularly skilled." Amanda placed her hand on his shoulder, offering support. "The important thing now is to ensure your mother's safety. She cannot return home while Bianca is there." Robert nodded, resolution hardening his expression. "Bianca is the one who's leaving. Today." When they returned to the waiting room, they found Bianca pacing nervously back and forth. Finally, what was going on in there? Why all the secrecy? "I think you know exactly why, Bianca," Robert replied, his tone icy. "What? What are you talking about?" "About my mother's bruises. About the finger marks on her arms. About her malnutrition. About the terror in her eyes every time you approach her." Bianca took a step back, shaking her head in denial. "No, you can't believe that. She's confused. She's making things up. Amanda documented everything, Bianca. There's no denying it. It's over. Bianca's face transformed, the mask of concern giving way to an expression of contained fury. You're going to believe this pretentious doctor over your own wife? The woman who gave up her career to take care of your family, who puts up with your ungrateful mother every day, while you only worry about your precious business. Enough, Bianca. I don't want to hear any more lies. Lies? You haven't seen anything yet, Robert. Your mother is a manipulative old woman who can't stand sharing her dear son's attention with anyone. She's hated me since day one. She'll do anything to separate us. Amanda stepped between the two. Bianca, I suggest you calm down. We are in a hospital, and your conduct is being recorded by security cameras. The mention of cameras seemed to bring Bianca partially back to reality. She looked around, noticing the curious glances of nurses and patients, and tried to regain her composure. Robert, please, let's go home and talk about this in private. There's a terrible misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. My mother is not coming home while you are there. In fact, Robert took a deep breath, the determination clear in his voice. I want you out of my house today. And tomorrow we'll talk about divorce. Divorce? Bianca's scream echoed down the corridor. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you, for us? What you did was torture my mother for years, Bianca. It's over. Robert turned to Amanda. Can my mother stay here tonight? Of course. I'll arrange a private room. No, this is absurd. Bianca grabbed Robert's arm. You can't do this to me. You can't just discard me after everything we've built together. Robert roughly pulled away. Don't touch me. Ever again. Turning, he re-entered the consulting room, closing the door behind him. In the corridor, Bianca stood still, her breathing ragged, her face contorted in a mixture of anger and despair. Amanda watched her with clinical caution. It's over, Bianca. I suggest you accept this with dignity. Bianca's eyes flashed with hatred. This isn't over. Nothing is over. You don't know who you're messing with. With these words, she spun on her heels and walked away down the corridor, the sound of her heels echoing like an ominous premonition of what was yet to come. The night at the hospital was long for Mrs. Eleanor. Despite the comfort of the private room Amanda had provided, the whirlwind of emotions kept sleep at bay. Sitting by the window, she watched the lights of London twinkle in the darkness as she tried to process everything that had happened. You should try to get some sleep, Robert suggested, who had insisted on staying by her side. He seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 24 hours, the weight of guilt evident in his tired eyes. I can't, son. It's as if a weight has been lifted from my chest, but at the same time, I'm afraid of what lies ahead. Robert knelt beside his mother's chair, holding her wrinkled hands in his. I'm so sorry, Mother, so much. I failed you in every possible way. No, Robert, you were deceived, just as I have been in so many situations in life. The difference is that I knew what was happening, and yet I chose to remain silent. Mrs. Eleanor caressed her son's face. My fear of losing you was greater than my instinct for survival. You'll never lose me, Mother, and I wouldn't forgive myself if something irreparable had happened. Both remained silent for a few minutes, the shared pain creating a new bond between them, deeper, more honest than it had been for years. What do we do now? Mrs. Eleanor finally asked. First, ensure your safety. Amanda suggested filing a police report against Bianca. With the medical documentation, there's a basis for a criminal prosecution for elder abuse. The elderly woman hesitated. A lawsuit means everything will become public. The newspapers, society. I know it's difficult, Mother, but Bianca needs to face the consequences of her actions, and other people need to be protected. She might do the same to other vulnerable individuals. Mrs. Eleanor nodded slowly. You're right. I just don't want this to hurt you more than you already are. Don't worry about me. My only focus now is you and your recovery. The next morning, Amanda entered the room accompanied by a middle-aged woman with a serene expression and a folder of documents. Good morning. This is my best energy level, so enjoy, Amanda joked, trying to lighten the mood. Mrs. Eleanor Robert, this is Dr. Marianne Foster, a psychologist specializing in trauma and domestic violence against the elderly. It's a pleasure to meet you. Despite the circumstances, Marianne greeted in a calm voice. I'm here to help with the emotional recovery process and also to provide support during legal proceedings, if you decide to pursue that path. Over the next 2 hours, Marianne conducted an initial session with Mrs. Eleanor, creating a safe space for her to share her experience. Robert, at his mother's request, remained in the room, listening with tears in his eyes to the details of the suffering she had silently endured for years. "What hurt me most weren't the physical blows," Mrs. Eleanor confessed, "but the constant humiliation, being treated as a worthless object, as a burden. After a lifetime of running companies, making important decisions, to see myself reduced to nothing." "You were never reduced to nothing, Mrs. Eleanor," Marianne firmly intervened. "The fact that you survived this situation while maintaining your sanity and compassion shows extraordinary inner strength. Many people would not have withstood what you faced." At the end of the session, Marianne explained the next steps: regular therapy, participation in a support group for victims of domestic violence, and if they decided to proceed with legal action, preparation for testimonies. Regarding the legal issue, the psychologist continued, the Elderly Persons Safeguarding Act provides severe penalties for cases of abuse. Dr. Perry's documentation is very complete and provides a solid basis for a lawsuit. "We want to go through with this," Robert declared with determination, "not just for my mother, but for anyone else Bianca might harm in the future." Meanwhile, at the Sterling mansion, Bianca had returned the previous night to find her belongings piled in the entrance hall and the locks changed. Connie, under Robert's instructions, had supervised the move with the help of hired security guards to ensure that nothing but Bianca's personal belongings were taken. "This won't stand," Bianca had threatened as the security guards carried her bags to the taxi. "Robert will realize the mistake he's making. That manipulative old woman won't win." "The only manipulator here is you, Mrs. Sterling," Connie had replied with a courage she had never shown before. "And now everyone knows." On the morning of the third day Mrs. Eleanor was discharged from the hospital, Robert took her home, where Connie and George had prepared a warm welcome. The house was filled with flowers. Her favorite lunch was being prepared, and on her bedroom nightstand, a new radio, even more modern than the previous one, awaited along with a stack of classical music CDs. "Welcome back, Mrs. Eleanor," Connie smiled, hugging her with genuine affection. "The house wasn't the same without you." "Thank you, Connie, for everything, not just for this welcome, but for being brave when I couldn't be." In the following weeks, a new routine was established at the mansion. Mrs. Eleanor began her therapy sessions with Dr. Marianne and gradually started to regain not only her physical health, but also her self-confidence. Robert, determined to make amends for years of neglect, reorganized his work schedule to spend more time at home, often accompanying his mother to her appointments and activities. The legal process against Bianca progressed slowly, as expected. She had hired one of London's most expensive law firms and vehemently denied all accusations, attempting to paint Mrs. Eleanor as a confused and manipulative elderly woman, and herself as a victim of a family conspiracy. "She will try everything to discredit you," explained the prosecutor assigned to the case, Dr. Henry Barton, during a preparatory meeting. "She will exploit the fact that there were no previous complaints. She will question why Mrs. Eleanor waited so long to speak. She will suggest that it's all just revenge for some family disagreement." "We are prepared," Robert assured. "We have the medical documentation, the testimony of Connie and George, and the truth on our side." "The truth is not always enough in the judicial system," the prosecutor pondered. "But in this case, I believe we have a solid case. The physical evidence is compelling, and Dr. Amanda Perry's reputation is unassailable." 3 months after the incident that revealed the truth, Mrs. Eleanor felt strong enough to take an important step in her recovery, visiting the support group for victims of domestic violence that Marianne had recommended. "Are you sure you want to go alone?" Robert asked, concerned, as his mother prepared to leave. "I need to do this for myself, son," she replied, adjusting her pearl necklace over her navy blue blouse. "It's part of the process of rediscovering myself as an independent person." The group met in a cozy room at the Islington Cultural Centre. When Mrs. Eleanor entered, she found about 10 women of different ages, from young women in their 20s to other elderly women like herself. "Welcome," greeted the group facilitator. a middle-aged black woman named Louise. Please feel free to introduce yourself when you're ready. But there's no pressure to speak today if you don't feel comfortable. Mrs. Eleanor observed in silence as the participants shared their stories, accounts of physical, psychological, financial abuse perpetrated by husbands, children, caregivers. Each narrative resonated with her own experience, making her realize that she was not alone in her pain. When it was her turn, Mrs. Eleanor surprised herself with the firmness of her voice. "My name is Eleanor Sterling. I am 76 years old, and for 5 years I lived under the same roof as my torturer, my daughter-in-law." She took a deep breath before continuing. "Throughout that time I believed that silence would protect me, that enduring the pain in silence was my duty as a mother, so as not to disturb the happiness of those I loved. Today I know that this silence almost destroyed me." The women around her listened with respectful attention, many nodding in recognition. The hardest part was not enduring the physical aggressions, but losing my identity. I ran companies, made decisions that affected hundreds of lives. I was respected in the business world, and suddenly I found myself reduced to nothing, to a frightened shadow, afraid to speak, to breathe too loudly, to exist. Silent tears streamed down the faces of some participants as Mrs. Eleanor continued. "I'm still learning not to blame myself, not to think that I somehow deserved what happened. I still wake up in the middle of the night, thinking she will come into my room to punish me for some imaginary mistake. But I am here, I am alive, and for the first time in years, I'm starting to remember who I truly am." When she finished, the room remained silent for a few moments, until one of the younger women stood up and simply hugged her, without saying anything. That spontaneous gesture of female solidarity broke something inside Mrs. Eleanor, and she cried, not tears of fear or pain, but of relief, of shared understanding. At the end of the meeting, as the women said goodbye, Louise approached Mrs. Eleanor. "Your testimony was very powerful," the facilitator said. "Many older women suffer in silence, believing it's too late to start over, that they should simply endure. Your story shows that it's never too late to seek dignity and justice." "Thank you," Mrs. Eleanor replied, feeling an immediate connection with Louise. "I didn't imagine that talking about it could be so liberating. It's the first step. Transforming personal suffering into something that can help others is a powerful form of healing." Louise's words stayed with Mrs. Eleanor throughout the drive back home. As the taxi crossed the city, she observed the buildings, the people on the sidewalks, life pulsing around her, and for the first time in years, she felt part of that movement, not just a spectator. At home, she found Robert working in the office. Seeing her, he immediately closed his laptop. "How was it, Mother?" "Transformative," she replied, sitting across from him. "Robert, I've been thinking. I want to do something with this experience, something that helps other people in the same situation." "Like what?" "I don't know exactly yet. Perhaps create a foundation, or support organizations that already work with elderly victims of abuse. Use my business experience for something meaningful." Robert smiled, recognizing in his mother's eyes the same determination she had always had in the days when she ran the family business. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Count on me for whatever you need." 6 months after the incident at the hospital, the case against Bianca finally went to trial. The courtroom was full. The case had attracted media attention, not only because of Bianca's profile as a London society lady, but also due to increasing awareness of elder abuse. During 3 tense days, the court heard testimonies, Mrs. Eleanor recounting years of abuse, Connie and George describing what they witnessed, Dr. Perry presenting the medical evidence, psychology experts discussing patterns of abuse and control. Bianca, in turn, maintained the posture of an unjustly victimized person, even shedding tears while alleging that Mrs. Eleanor suffered from mental confusion and that the entire accusation was the result of the elderly woman's manipulation, resentful of no longer being the center of attention in her son's life. On the 3rd day, when the judge announced the sentence, the room was in complete silence. Given the evidence presented, this court finds the defendant, Bianca Sterling, guilty of physical and psychological violence against an elderly person, as provided for in the Elderly Persons Safeguarding Act. The established penalty is 4 years of imprisonment. in addition to compensation for moral damages in the amount of $500,000. A murmur ran through the room as Bianca paled, her mask of confidence finally crumbling. Her lawyers immediately announced that they would appeal the decision. But the impact of the sentence was undeniable. For Mrs. Eleanor, the conviction brought no joy, only a deep sense of justice and closure. As she watched Bianca being led out of the courtroom, she felt no hatred, only a kind of pity for someone so empty inside that they could only assert themselves by causing pain to others. In the weeks following the sentence, Mrs. Eleanor channeled her energy into realizing the idea that had emerged after the support group. With Robert's help and a team of dedicated professionals, she founded the Phoenix Institute, a non-profit organization dedicated to identifying, supporting, and offering legal and psychological resources to elderly victims of domestic violence. The official launch took place on a sunny spring afternoon, in the garden of the Sterling Mansion. The same garden that had once silently witnessed her suffering now celebrated her rebirth. Authorities, NGO representatives, health professionals, and most importantly, abuse survivors gathered to support the initiative. When it was time for Mrs. Eleanor to speak, she ascended the small stage set up near the cherry tree, leaning lightly on Robert's arm. She looked at the audience, attentive, expectant faces, and felt an inner calm she hadn't experienced in years. Just over 6 months ago, I was trapped in a cage of fear and silence, convinced that my voice didn't matter, that my pain was the price to pay for the supposed happiness of those I loved. Her voice, firm and clear, carried the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to value every moment of freedom. Today I am here to tell every person in this situation, your voice matters. Your pain is not the price to pay for anything or anyone. In the front row, Connie and George watched with pride, alongside Amanda and Marianne. Further back, many of the women from the support group attended to honor the one who had become an inspiration for all. The Phoenix Institute is born from my suffering, but it will be nourished by hope. Hope that no elderly person needs to suffer in silence, that each of us is seen not as a burden, but as a human being worthy of respect and care. At the end of her speech, as the audience applauded standing, Mrs. Eleanor looked at the blue London sky, feeling a gentle breeze caress her face. She remembered when she used to tell Robert as a child, "Never be afraid to start over, son. As long as there is life, there is possibility." Now at 76, she lived that truth in her own skin. Later, when the guests had left and twilight painted the sky in orange hues, Mrs. Eleanor and Robert sat on the back balcony, enjoying coffee. "Do you know what I learned from all this, Robert?" she asked, watching a hummingbird visit the garden flowers. "What, Mother?" "That love, when it blinds, becomes a prison. And forgiveness is not forgetting. It's deciding that the pain no longer controls you." She took a sip of coffee before continuing. "I forgave Bianca, not for her, but for me, so as not to carry the weight of hatred." Robert held his mother's hand, moved. "You not only survived, Mother, you lived. And you continue to live intensely." Mrs. Eleanor smiled as the new radio softly played a Bach sonata in the background. The silence between mother and son was now different. Not the oppressive silence of fear, but the comfortable silence of mutual understanding, of reconquered peace. On the 4th floor of the Old Bailey, Bianca awaited transfer to Holloway Women's Prison. Her lawyer had just informed her that the request to await the appeal out of custody had been denied. Sitting on the cold bench, with the prison uniform replacing her designer clothes, she finally understood the meaning of the word consequence. The next day, London's main newspaper featured a photo of Mrs. Eleanor at the inauguration of the Phoenix Institute, smiling serenely under the headline, "From Pain to Purpose, How an Abuse Survivor Transforms Her Experience into Hope for Other Elderly People." The article ended with a quote from her that perfectly summarized her journey. "Fear silences, but courage heals, and it's never too late to find your voice." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Mrs. Eleanor's story has touched your hearts and sparked important reflections on respect and care for our elderly. To continue this journey of emotional stories that explore the complexities of life, be sure to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. Leave your like on this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is fundamental to us. We have prepared a special playlist with other equally impactful narratives, which you can access by clicking the link on the left. Every day we bring unique content that moves, inspires, and makes you think. Until the next story.